Hi, so today I'm just making this video to go over the content for your external exam, specifically looking at Judaism and how they respond to human rights and their understanding of human rights. So before we jump in, as always, we have our pep talk now because we have just finished our assignment on the one and only Dalai Lama. Well, not one and only, there's been multiple, but you know what I mean, the man we all love. I thought it would be a great way to start our investigation into Judaism with a little bit of a pep talk from him. So he says, in discussing an approach to bringing about positive changes within oneself, learning is only the first step. There are other factors as well: conviction, determination, action, and effort. So the next step is learning conviction. Learning and education are important because they help one develop conviction of the need to change and help increase one's commitment. This conviction to change then develops into determination. Next, one transforms determination into action. The strong determination to change enables one to make a sustained effort to implement the actual changes. The final factor of effort is critical. So, as we're going through our prep, we are going to make sure that we have conviction. That leads to determination, and of course that results in action, and that action is sustained through effort. So let's go on. So as we always start, Judaism follows a linear worldview as well as our two other Abrahamic faiths of Christianity and Islam, and that also stands in contrast to Buddhism and Hinduism that follow a cyclical worldview. So the purpose of Judaism is to fulfill the covenant with God. Now you'll notice here I've got G-D. Now in Judaism, the name of God is seen as being very holy. That's why we have found, if you're thinking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, which were written thousands of years ago, but they were so carefully preserved. Now, why were they so carefully preserved? Because they had the name of God on them, so they couldn't be, thrown away or treated recklessly or carelessly. That's also why the Book of Esther wasn't found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because it doesn't contain the name of God, so they didn't have to preserve it in the way in which they had to preserve other texts. So, out of a sign of respect, when we write God down in a Jewish context, we are going to be writing G-D. Now, doing that in your exam is going to show that higher level of understanding and insight into the religion. All right, so rights and duties. So rights are very closely linked to duties in Islam. So there are three different rights. So the first is divine rights that God claims for God's self. So that's not necessarily linked to our discussion of human rights, but it's what God deserves, okay? Then we have natural rights that all humans have. So this is definitely a discussion of human rights, no matter their religion, no matter their gender. It's about all rights. And finally, Torah rights that Jews claim for themselves. So right to certain land, we might see that in the Palestine-Israeli conflict. Rights to, gain through the covenant made with God, things like that. So what's very important, violation of human rights require a response. So Jews refer to this obligation as something called hova, meaning to owe. So essentially, it's this understanding of when human rights are violated, we have an obligation to right that wrong. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. All right, sacred text. So the core sacred text is the Torah, which is the first section of the Tanakh. Now remember, Tanakh is an acronym. The T, the N, and the K stand for key sections of the Hebrew Bible. So the T stands for the Torah, N is the Nevi'im, and K is the Ketuvim. So Torah is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, so Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The Nevi'im has the writings from the prophet, and the Ketuvim has the kind of writings like the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and books like that. So we find directions about what is correct behavior in the Torah. So it provides, and the entire Tanakh, but especially the Torah, it provides the foundation of ethical teachings. So how one should treat another, and it emphasizes the protection of human life. So if we're looking at human rights as outlined in sacred texts, so human life is sacred and God-given. Sorry, I should have done a dash there. That's my mistake. As each human is made in the image of God. All right. So again, very similar to Christianity, as we know. Christianity, the Old Testament, contains a large amount of books from the Hebrew Bible. So we're going to have that same understanding of humanity due to sharing the same creation story. The covenant requires Jews to treat their fellow humans correctly with dignity and respect. So we can see that really clearly outlined where we have the Ten Commandments. So one of the most famous set of teachings from the Hebrew Bible, in Exodus 20, it essentially outlines mainly the last 6 about how to treat others. So the first 4 are more about how do we treat God, so about not worshipping any other idols before him, things like that. But then the others are about how you treat people around you. So do not steal from them, do not kill them, things like that, which obviously quite clearly link to human rights and how we should treat one another. Then we have something called Pekuach Nefesh. Now, I could be saying that wrong, but that's my best crack at it. So it's about this understanding of the preservation of human life. So the goal of, so human life is seen as so sacred in Judaism that to save it, you may break a command. So an example, say it's on the Sabbath and someone is injured and you're a doctor and you need to heal them. That's an example, pretty bad one. Another example, you might need to steal something in order to save someone. Well, we're really going downhill there. But the main message of it is that you are allowed to break a commandment if the motive and purpose is to save a human life, okay? So it just makes clear the sanctity of life in Judaism. Okay, some key teachings. So as we mentioned, the 10 Commandments. The belief that human life is sacred because humans are made in the image of God. We also understand that God alone has control over life and death. So Jews are not to interfere with the natural course of life. So that might come in if we were talking about, say, ethical issues such as euthanasia. And of course, very importantly, the teaching of love thy neighbor, which we will find in Leviticus 19. So just to go over, Tikkun Olam is the Hebrew word for world repair. So this concept refers to social action and the pursuit of social justice. So it's about trying to seek justice for all. That could be in the form of trying to ease poverty or eradicate poverty, to help those who are suffering, to right wrongs in the world. That is all expressed in this idea of Tikkun Olam. Then we also have Hova, which I briefly mentioned at the start. So it's this idea that when we see a wrong in the world, so someone being treated unfairly, their rights being taken away, we have a responsibility to right that wrong, okay? So humans have a responsibility to rule over the earth in a just way, and we see that again in that Genesis story where God gives humans dominion over the earth, but with that comes the responsibility to do it correctly. Now, I'm not going to play these videos, however, they are in the slides for you. This is just a bit of a video that kind of goes through Tikkun Olam and how it's expressed through different. You know what? We will watch it. We won't watch the Sesame Street one there. That's just for fun that I've put in. So shalom means peace. It's just from Sesame Street, and I just thought it was a great way to show how these Jewish teachings are really part of the bringing up of children, it really is integral to a Jewish person's life, okay? So I just thought that was important. We will watch this one quickly, though. So I just thought that was great because it gave some real-world examples of how Tikkun Olam is being a lived experience, living out that teaching. All right, so rituals. We'll start with birth rituals with circumcision from the Brit Milah, which is called Brit Milah, So it's at the heart of Judaism because it reflects that covenant that was made between Abraham and God in Genesis. So the first covenant made, or promise, and it is a physical sign of that covenant. It's performed by a Moel 8 days after birth, Moel. So by confirming the covenant through circumcision, Jewish men are confirming their commitment to living according to God's laws under that covenant. So that includes following the 10 Commandments, seeing life as sacred and respecting that sanctity of life, and understanding that God alone has control over life and death. Then we have death rituals. So in Judaism, that includes preparing the body for correct burial, ritual cleansing, called tahara. The individual is dressed in white and placed in a coffin. They are not embalmed or cremated because burial happens as soon as possible after death in order to free the soul from the physical constraints of the body. Then we also have something called Shiva, which is a mourning ritual. And this lasts for weeks after the funeral. Individuals do not leave their homes except to attend synagogue on Shabbat. So remember, that's the day of rest. Kiddush prayer is said in order to release the soul from the body. So that's a sanctifying prayer. So death and mourning rituals confirm 2 key beliefs. So the first is the covenant, so confirming their commitment to living according to the covenant and the teachings that fall under that, including the mitzvot, and the belief that the soul is eternal. So again, reinforcing that linear worldview. All right, here are our relevant resources for you to do some further reading. And I will now talk you through practice question 1A. And of course, here are the relevant Atomi activities. Thanks.